Introducing Dr. Fanny Redding, President of the National Council of Jewish Women of Australia.
Great women imbued with ideals of service have always appealed to my imagination. Among them, two American women, Hannah Solomon and Henrietta Zold, especially stood out. Hannah Solomon organized the Jewish women of the United States in the many causes of our people, attending chiefly to the welfare of the immigrants who were flocking to America. Henrietta Zold, of immortal memory, had her eyes ever fixed on Eretz Yisrael and organized the American women Zionists to raise funds for the medical welfare of the people of the Holy Land. 25 years ago, I felt the great need of organized Jewish womanhood in Australia, who would play their part and take their place in the life of the community and in the life of the bigger community, the world. When Bella Pevsner came to Australia in 1923, she inspired me to plan an organization with a Zionist soul, and the National Council of Jewish Women was the outcome. Through our organization, we have given splendid service to our country and to our race. We have created for ourselves a glorious chapter in Australian Jewish history. And now, here our proud record, past, present, and future.
Past, present, and future.
The story, the deeds, the performance, and the successes of the National Council of Jewish Women of Australia in the past, in the present, and in the future. The story of the struggle and the triumphs of a band of Australian women, bound up with the story of the suffering and the agony of the Jewish people. A bright ray of light to illumine the dark events of the past decades and to shine out in the future as a beacon of goodwill.
June 1923. Australia received a visit from Madame Bella Pevsner, who delivered a series of brilliant and stirring addresses which aroused many Jewish women to a greater sense of responsibility for the great work carried on by their sisters in Palestine. Having heard the rousing appeal by Madame Pevsner, Dr. Fanny Redding felt that the Jewish women in Australia and New Zealand should unite as one large body and form a National Council of Jewish Women of Australasia. Dr. Redding started to work towards this end, calling a preliminary meeting of women on July the 8th of that year. On July the 15th, a second inaugural meeting was held, at which 25 women were present, and the objects of the movement were expounded. A provisional committee was formed, which decided to call itself the Council of Jewish Women. A little later, the first general meeting was held at the great synagogue chambers, at which 40 women were present. And so was launched what was destined to become one of the greatest forces for good in the Southern Hemisphere, the National Council of Jewish Women of Australia. Broadly, the program envisaged philanthropy, irrespective of race or creed, religious work, Zionist work, migrant welfare service, and education. In the first annual report, Dr. Fanny Redding said,
"Your council, by its efforts in the educational, Zionist, social, and philanthropic sphere of communal activities, has provided the justification for its existence. It has brought together in more intimate association, fellowship, and understanding the women and girls of our community, resulting in satisfaction to themselves, benefit to the community, encouragement to the deserving, and assistance to the oppressed and needy of our brethren in foreign lands."
And so this great philanthropic organization was born, and, always under the guidance and driving power of its founder and president, Dr. Fanny Redding, continued to function in every sphere of social welfare. Nothing was too big or too small for this magnificent organization to undertake, and the members gave freely of their time, effort, and understanding for the welfare of the community as a whole. Time does not permit a full list of its multifarious activities, as we are dealing with the past briefly. Listen to the record over the passing years. (1923), the National Council of Jewish Women formed in Sydney, together with a junior section.
1924, 377 members at the end of the first year.
1926, the opening of the Sydney Infant Welfare Center in Tel Aviv, Palestine.
1927, formation of the Brisbane Council of Jewish Women, and later, the same year, the formation of the Melbourne Council.
1928, opening of Jewish Men's Hostel in Sydney. In Brisbane, the opening of council rooms. In the same year, the Melbourne Council disbursed £455 and opened its own council rooms.
1929, Dr. Redding inscribed in the Golden Book in Palestine. The opening of new council rooms in Sydney and Castlereagh Street. First Jewish Women's Conference in Sydney, attended by 115 delegates from Australia and New Zealand. Council received an anonymous gift of £300 for Palestine maternity work. Council of Jewish Women formed in Perth. £643 raised almost at once. In this year, council sections formed also in Newcastle, Kalgoorlie, Adelaide, Ballarat, and Geelong.
(1930), Melbourne Council forms an education committee to assist the United Hebrew Education Board.
1931, new council rooms for the Jewish C&Y Centre in the heart of Sydney.
1932, the Hobart Council formed.
1932-33, the years of the Depression. The council was tireless in its efforts to assist the needy, visiting hospitals, distributing parcels, clothing and money, and at the same time keeping up a continual supply of money and clothing to Palestine. Their efforts won the approbation of citizens of all creeds, statesmen, administrators, and visiting celebrities. This is but a brief survey, a backward glance across the years. But during all that time, the National Council of Jewish Women was carrying out its task of philanthropy in accordance with the Jewish creed. Hundreds of settlers from the persecuted Jewish communities of Europe were being brought into Australia, and the migration section was working night and day for the welfare of those of our brethren who'd come to seek a new life in a strange land.
Palestine. Dear to the heart of every council member is the upbuilding of the national home in Palestine, now Israel. Mothers and children held our first claim. In response to Women's International Zionist Organization, Council founded Infant Welfare Center in Tel Aviv in 1924. Assisted in establishment of day nurseries, Children's Home, Mount Carmel, Girls' Agricultural Schools.
In response to Rose Slutskin's appeal for maternity aid, Council built maternity ward in the Hadassah Rothschild Hospital on Mount Scopus. Council fosters and supports maternity work of Ezra throughout Palestine by annual Mother's Day drive.
In response to Henrietta Zoll's appeal for the children of Europe, Council assisted Youth Aliyah to transfer 22,000 children to Palestine by supporting every Youth Aliyah appeal.
In response to the age-old decree, out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of God from Jerusalem, Council established the Rose Mandelbaum and the Edward Maurice Raymond Scholarships, tenable at the Hebrew University on Mount Scopus.
In response to the call for land and more land, Council supports every Jewish National Fund appeal. Melbourne Council establishes Naklat Fanny Redding. Sections plant trees in Council forests.
In response to the need for land development and colonization, Council has supported every Keren Hereside appeal with generous contributions. Mogen David Adom, Jewish Red Cross, fired the imagination of Council's younger women. £1,000 was raised and instantly dispatched. Today, Council acclaims the Jewish state of Israel. Council rallies to its support. Her gallant band of women reaffirm their faith in the ideals of Nordau, Herzl, Weizmann, creators of the Jewish state.
Every form of entertainment was enlisted to raise money for our suffering and dispossessed people. Hospitals were visited, beds undired.
Council educational work advanced. Fanny Breckler Scholarship established in Perth. Council Juniors of Australia founded Fanny Redding Scholarship at the Melbourne University in the Faculty of Semitics. Jewish Agency Scholarship established for study in Palestine in 1948.
And so the tireless round of activities continued unceasingly. By this time, the Council of Jewish Women had grown into a worldwide philanthropic organization, spreading its ramifications into every section of the community. What had been launched at a small meeting, attended by 15 women, had grown into a mighty organization with branches throughout Australia, comprising thousands of women working tirelessly for every cause. Meanwhile, soul-stirring events were taking place throughout the world. In Palestine, under a British mandate, a young and vigorous nation was rising phoenix-like from the old ashes. The children of the new Palestine sent forth a call for aid. The response from the National Council of Jewish Women in Australia was instantaneous. Money, gifts, food poured forth in an ever-growing stream to the Holy Land.
In 1934, in an address to the Centenary International Congress in Melbourne, Dr. Redding said,
Jewish women have thrown in their strength and influence to remove injustices to women and children, especially with regard to bad working conditions and long hours in dangerous trades. The protection of women and children throughout the world has been enthusiastically enforced by English women of Jewish faith. In common with her non-Jewish sisters, the Jewish women realized that we live in a changing world. Religion, morals, and manners are in the melting pot. We are living in a most critical period of the world's history, and therefore, with due appreciation of the seriousness of this world's problems, the Jewish woman is trying to save the world by stressing greater spiritual values, the beauty of right living, and the paramount claims of motherhood.
In 1933, when the National Council of Jewish Women of Australia was now firmly established, descended the ever-darkening shadow which presaged the greatest agony and martyrdom ever experienced by the Jewish race. The shadow of Hitlerism.
Protests poured in from all parts of the world. Speaking on behalf of the National Council of Jewish Women, Dr. Redding said,
"This conference on all humanity is starkly familiar with the policy which is being carried out in the slaughterhouse of Europe today. Never in the history of mankind, not even within the recollection of my own people, whose days have never been free from persecution, has there been anything to equal this ghastly tragedy. Hitler improved upon old methods of pogroms and brutality and unleashed the worst savageries that have ever been known to man.
The voice of the German beast rose above the clamor of an outraged world.
The Jews must be destroyed! They are our enemies! They will set the world against us! Not only Germany, but Europe must unite to destroy the Jewish race! Quick to the rescue sprang the gallant band of workers. Permits were obtained, ships, trains, planes met. English-speaking classes were formed. Hundreds of eager students thronged the council rooms. Since June 1946, canteens arranged meals on the wharves, outings and accommodation for the recently released concentration camp victims. UNRWA assisted. Thousands of garments were dispatched. Large sums of money contributed to every overseas relief appeal.
The National Council of Jewish Women of Australia counted time as nothing. In every state, in every city, in every town, they worked night and day to aid their desperate brothers and sisters.
With the coming of the World War, the National Council of Jewish Women in Australia was organized and ready to function for the common welfare. The welfare of our fighting men, the welfare of our persecuted people, and the welfare of those bereaved by the horrors of war. Their president said,
"Never in the history of our council has greater responsibility been placed on us, and we must be prepared to give every kind of service to our country and to our people, who for so many centuries have been tortured and oppressed by tyrants."
And the council bulletin wrote,
Just as the men of Jewry flocked to the colors, so were their womenfolk tireless in their endeavors to bring the ultimate victory and to supply aid to the community.
September 3rd, 1939. War proclaimed. Next day, September the 4th, council war work began. Wool was bought, shirts and pajamas were made for the Lord Mayor's Patriotic Fund and the Red Cross. Mobile canteens were secured. Transport trucks dispatched overseas. Monash Recreation Hut in Hyde Park established. Beds in Red Cross hospitals endired. £18,000 was raised for the Australian Comforts Fund by the Sydney Kiosk in Martin Place and the Midway Arcade Shop, Melbourne. £300,000 raised for the Commonwealth War Loan. The personal thanks of world-famous statesmen, soldiers, politicians were extended time and again to this magnificent band of women.
So we come to the troubled peace. The future, what does it hold for the Jewish race? With no conflict of loyalties, the National Council of Jewish Women faces its double task: the building of the peace here at home, the building of its home in Israel in peace. Shalom uveracha.